Tomorrow you will belong to him whether you want it or not. Those were the last words Faith heard from her father that night, and they burned in her heart like fire. In the small dusty village of Umunaka, where the red sand covered every footpath and the sun seemed to burn everything it touched, lived a young woman named Faith. She was only 22, but her eyes held the weight of many years, as if she had carried the troubles of 100 lifetimes. Since her mother passed away 5 years ago, life had grown harder. Her father, Mr. Okiki, was once a kind man, a farmer who smiled freely, but after her mother's death, he became bitter and cruel. Now he drank too much palm wine and shouted more than he farmed. Worse still was the woman he married after Mrs. Aday's, Faith's stepmother, who hated Faith with all her heart. Each day, Faith woke before dawn. She cooked the small breakfast for the family, swept the dusty compound, fetched firewood, and helped on the farm. From morning till night, there was work, but little rest. Her stepmother was quick to shout and punish if anything was not done perfectly. One morning, Faith was gathering firewood near the edge of the village when her father's voice cut through the quiet like a whip. "Faith, come here now." She dropped the branches and hurried inside, her heart pounding fast. "What is it, father?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady, even though her hands trembled. Mr. Okiki sat on the worn wooden chair, his eyes bloodshot and tired, as he took a slow sip of palm wine. "You think I can feed you forever?" He sneered, his voice harsh. "I found a way to stop feeding a mouth that brings no money." Fear tightened in Faith's chest. "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, Mrs. Aday's appeared in the doorway, a cruel smile on her lips. "We're giving you away tomorrow," she said coldly, "to that carpenter boy who works on the farm." Eli Faith's heart sank like a stone. "But I don't want to marry him," she whispered, barely able to breathe. "I want to go to the city, to study nursing, to help people." Mr. Okeke laughed bitterly. "Dream all you want. You will marry Eli tomorrow, or you leave this house with nothing." Tears streamed down Faith's face as she shook her head. "Please, Papa, don't do this. I don't even know him." "Enough," Mrs. Aday's hissed sharply. "Love doesn't put food on the table, girl. Be thankful someone wants you at all." The whole village whispered about Faith's fate. They said she was lucky, but she knew the truth. She was a pawn in her father's game. The man named Eli was poor, quiet, and wore the same worn clothes every day. He worked hard on the farm, but was never paid. That night, Faith sat alone outside her small hut. The red dust settled on her thin clothes as she whispered a prayer. "Lord, please help me. Give me peace. Don't let this man be cruel like my father." In the shadows, a figure watched quietly, waiting for tomorrow's dawn, when Faith's life would change forever. The morning sun rose slowly over Umunaka, casting long shadows over the cracked red earth. Faith woke before dawn as usual, her heart heavy with fear and uncertainty. Today was the day her life would change forever, but she didn't know how much. She stepped outside her small hut, the dry air thick with dust. Her feet sank slightly into the warm sand as she walked toward the farm where Eli worked. She had seen him many times before, a quiet man with tired eyes and calloused hands. He wore the same faded shirt every day, and his shoes were old and cracked. No one spoke much to Eli except to mock him quietly. They said he was slow, poor, and had no future. Faith found him under the big baobab tree, chopping wood with steady, slow swings of his axe. His face was calm but worn. When he saw her, he nodded a little. "Good morning, Eli," she said softly, trying to steady her voice. He put down the axe and wiped the sweat from his brow. "Good morning, Faith." She hesitated, then asked, Do you want to marry me?" Eli looked surprised, but didn't answer at first. Then he said quietly, "I don't know what to say. I've never thought about marriage." Faith bit her lip. "My father says I have no choice, that I must marry you tomorrow." He looked down at the dirt and nodded slowly. I heard him. I don't want to cause trouble. I'm just a carpenter, not a man worthy of a woman like you. Faith shook her head. I'm not worthy either. I want to go to the city, to study, to be free. Eli's eyes met hers, honest and kind. You deserve better than this, Faith. Before she could say more, a loud voice cut through the stillness. Eli, where's that wood I asked for? It was Mr. Okiki, staggering toward them with a half-empty bottle of palm wine. Eli stood quickly. I'm almost done, sir. Just a little more time. Mr. Okeki sneered and looked at Faith. You see this man? He works for me and I owe him nothing. Tomorrow he'll have you too, girl. You better be ready. Faith's heart pounded. She looked at Eli, who lowered his head and nodded slowly. That afternoon, as Faith returned home, her stepmother's harsh voice greeted her. Faith, clean the kitchen before nightfall, and don't forget to mend your father's torn shirt. Faith nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. As she worked, she whispered a prayer. Please, Lord, don't let this marriage be my prison. Give me strength. That night, as the village slept under the vast sky, Faith lay awake, staring at the cracked roof. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. Somewhere far away, a dog barked. Her mind was full of questions. What was her future? Would Eli be kind or cruel? Would she ever see the city she dreamed of? Unknown to her, in the shadows near the farm, a stranger watched. His clothes were dusty, his eyes sharp and searching. He carried a small bag and spoke quietly into a hidden radio. The girl is ready. Move in at dawn. Faith had no idea that her life was about to be pulled into a web of secrets far bigger than her village. The first light of dawn crept over the dusty village of Umunaka, turning the red sand golden and casting long shadows across the small huts. Faith woke with a heavy heart, her stomach twisting in knots. Today was the day she had feared, the day she would marry Eli, the quiet carpenter she barely knew. Her hands trembled as she dressed in the faded wrapper her father had given her. There was no joy in her eyes, only a deep sadness and a quiet resolve. She didn't want this marriage. She wanted to run, to leave the village and find a new life in the city, far from her father's cruel hands and her stepmother's harsh words. Outside, the village was already stirring. Neighbors whispered behind their hands, casting curious glances at Faith as she walked to the small white church at the center of the village. She's marrying that poor carpenter, one woman muttered. Must be for money, or shame, another said. Faith ignored the whispers and held her head high. The church was small and simple, its wooden benches worn smooth by years of prayers. Eli was already there, standing near the altar in his threadbare shirt and worn sandals. His eyes looked tired but calm, and when they met hers, she saw a flicker of nervousness. The pastor, an older man with a kind face, opened the Bible and began the ceremony. Faith's voice was barely audible when she repeated her vows. I do. Eli's voice was soft but steady as he said the same. The rings they exchanged were plastic, cheap toys, but they held a weight Faith didn't expect. Let us pray, the pastor said, and the church was filled with a quiet silence. After the ceremony, no music played, no cheers rose. The villagers left quietly, some shaking their heads, others whispering prayers for Faith's strength. Outside, Eli turned to her. Let's go home, he said gently. Faith followed him down the dusty path toward the small mud house that was to be their home. Her feet dragged on the red earth, and the silence between them was louder than the birds in the trees. As they neared the house, Faith's eyes caught a strange figure standing near the edge of the farm, a tall man dressed in a dark suit, wearing sunglasses and holding a small radio. She blinked, but when she looked again, he was gone. Did you see that man? She asked Eli quickly. Which man? Eli replied, not turning around. Faith said nothing more. Her mind was racing with questions she dared not voice aloud. That night, inside the small mud house, the air was heavy. Faith sat on the edge of the only bed, staring at the cracked ceiling. The lantern cast a dull yellow light, flickering softly. Eli sat on a wooden stool in the corner, quietly fixing a broken drawer handle. He hadn't spoken since they arrived, and he hadn't touched her. "You can sleep on the bed," he said softly. "I'll take the floor." Faith nodded, too tired and hurt to argue. As she lay down, she whispered a prayer for strength. Outside, the wind stirred the dry leaves, and somewhere in the distance, the village settled into uneasy sleep. The night in Umunaka was quiet, except for the soft chirping of crickets. Inside the small mud house, Faith lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling. Her mind was a whirlwind of fear, hope, and confusion. She couldn't shake the image of the strange man she saw near the farm earlier. Suddenly, a faint sound broke the silence, a phone ringing. Faith's heart jumped. She wasn't sure who owned a phone in this village, especially Eli. The old battered phone on the small wooden table lit up again, ringing persistently. Eli stirred on his stool and reached for it, but Faith was faster. She grabbed the phone, her fingers trembling. "Give me that," Eli said quietly, standing up and moving toward her. But Faith answered the call before he could reach her. "Sir, your jet is ready," a deep voice said urgently on the other side. "We're waiting on the runway." Faith's hands froze and her mouth dropped open. "Your jet?" she repeated, confused and frightened. Eli gently took the phone from her and ended the call. He looked tired, almost defeated. "That call wasn't for me," he said softly. It was a wrong number, but the voice sounded serious. Faith shook her head. "That man said, 'Your jet is ready.' Poor carpenter boys don't have jets, Eli." Eli avoided her eyes and began folding one of his shirts. "I told you I'm just a simple carpenter," he said quietly. But Faith wasn't convinced. "Who are you really?" she asked, her voice stronger now. Eli looked at her long and hard, his calm face hiding something deeper. "I told you the truth," he said slowly. "I'm just a carpenter." Faith lay awake the rest of the night, turning the strange phone call over in her mind. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the words again. "Sir, your jet is ready." When she looked at Eli sleeping on the floor, his breathing slow but forced, her heart ached. She felt the weight of the secret he carried, a secret that would change everything. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over Umunaka, casting soft orange light across the dusty paths. Faith woke early, her heart heavy but determined. She found Eli sitting quietly on the small wooden bench outside the house, sharpening his tools. "Eli," she called softly. He looked up, surprised to see her so early. "Good morning, Faith. Did you sleep?" "Not really," she admitted, sitting beside him. "I can't stop thinking about that phone call. And about you." Eli sighed, running a hand through his hair. "There are things I haven't told you, things I was afraid to say." Faith's eyes searched his face. "You can tell me. I want to understand." He took a deep breath and looked away, then back at her. "I'm not just a carpenter. My real name is Emmanuel, and I come from a family that owns businesses in the city." Faith's mouth opened in shock. "Why would you hide that?" "Because I wanted to live simply, away from the lies and greed," he said quietly. "I wanted to find someone who would love me for who I am, not for what I have." Faith looked at him, tears welling in her eyes. "And now? What will happen to us?" Eli smiled faintly. "Tomorrow I have to go back to the city. There are responsibilities waiting for me." Faith's heart sank. "What about me?" "You're not just part of my past, Faith," he said, taking her hand gently. "I want you to come with me, but I won't force you. You have to decide." Faith looked at their joined hands, then up at the sky. She thought of her father, her stepmother, the village. and the dreams she still held inside. "I want to come," she whispered, "but I'm scared." Eli squeezed her hand. "I'll be with you, every step of the way." They sat together in the quiet morning, two souls holding on to hope, ready to face whatever came next. The sun was just rising as Faith packed a small bag with the few clothes she owned. Her heart raced with a mix of fear and hope. Today, she would leave Umunaka, the dusty village that had been her whole world, though not always a kind one. Eli was waiting outside, his simple bag slung over one shoulder. He looked different in the soft morning light. Not just a quiet carpenter, but a man with a story and a future. Faith glanced back at the small hut one last time before stepping forward. As they walked down the dusty path toward the bus station, Faith's thoughts spun like the wind blowing through the red sand. She worried about what lay ahead, if the city would be kinder or harsher than her village. The bus ride was long and jarring, rattling over rough roads and passing unfamiliar towns. Faith pressed her forehead against the window, watching as the landscape changed from red dust to tall trees, and finally, to the bustling chaos of the city. Eli remained quiet, focused on the road ahead, but Faith could feel the weight of his presence beside her. He wasn't just a stranger anymore. He was her link to a new life, a chance she didn't fully understand yet. When they finally stepped off the bus into the noisy streets, Faith's eyes widened at the tall buildings, the bright lights, and the flood of people moving fast in every direction. It was a world apart from Umunaka, and she felt both overwhelmed and alive. Eli led her through narrow streets to a quiet compound hidden behind a tall gate. Inside, the air was cooler and filled with the scent of flowers, a small oasis amid the city's rush. "This is home," Eli said, gesturing toward a neat, modest house with clean windows and a locked door. Faith looked around with surprise. It wasn't a palace, but it was safe. And for the first time in years, she felt a spark of peace. That night, as she lay on the soft bed, far from the hard floors of her village, Faith whispered a prayer of thanks. The journey was only beginning, but for the first time, she dared to hope. Days turned into weeks, and Faith began settling into her new life. The city was noisy and fast, but Eli was steady and kind. He worked as a carpenter, fixing doors and chairs for neighbors. Faith helped where she could, learning new things each day. One afternoon, as Faith prepared dinner in their small kitchen, Eli sat across the table watching her with quiet eyes. "You're stronger than you think, Faith," he said softly. She smiled faintly. "I have to be. My life back home taught me that." Eli reached out and took her hand. "We'll make it. Together." Faith's heart lifted. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. For the first time, someone believed in her, not just as a burden or a way to pay a debt, but as a person with worth. But the past was never far away. One evening, a letter arrived, official looking and stamped with a distant city's seal. Faith's hands trembled as she opened it. The letter was from her father's lawyer, informing her that Mr. Okeke had passed away suddenly. Faith's breath caught. "I don't know what to feel," she whispered to Eli later that night. He held her close. "It's okay to feel lost, but you're not alone." Faith looked out the small window, the city lights flickering like stars. Her journey had been painful and uncertain, but now it held promise. "Maybe this is my chance to build a life I choose," she said quietly. Eli nodded. "And I'll be by your side every step." With her father gone, Faith felt a strange mix of grief and freedom. She used the small inheritance left to her wisely, enrolling in nursing classes at a nearby school. Balancing studies, work, and city life was hard. Some days exhaustion pressed on her like the heavy heat outside, but she pressed on. Her classmates admired her quiet determination. One day her teacher, Mrs. Necker, called her aside. "Faith, you have a gift. Not just for nursing, but for heart," she said kindly. Don't let anything dim your light. Faith smiled, hope blossoming like the flowers she now tended in their tiny courtyard. One evening, Eli surprised her with a small gift, a worn leather journal. "Write your dreams in here," he said, "and when you feel lost, read them back." Faith held the journal close, tears shining in her eyes. "Thank you." They stood together in their little home, two souls forged by hardship, but ready to rise. Life wasn't without its challenges. Daniel, the son of their landlord, often lingered too close, casting unwanted glances and making Faith uneasy. One day, as Faith returned from school, Daniel blocked the doorway. "You don't belong here," he sneered. "You're nothing but a village girl playing at city life." Faith's eyes flashed with quiet fire. "I belong wherever I choose to be." Eli arrived just in time, standing protectively beside her. "Back off, Daniel. She's family." Daniel scoffed, but stepped aside. Faith looked at Eli, gratitude shining. "Thank you," she whispered. Eli smiled softly. "Always." Faith's nursing skills grew, and so did her confidence. She volunteered at the local clinic, helping those who needed her most. One day, as she dressed in her clean white coat, Eli watched proudly. "You're amazing, Faith." She smiled, the journey from dusty village paths to healing hands now clear. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, Faith knew one truth her story was hers to write. Years had passed since Faith left the dusty village of Umunaka. The red sands still whispered stories of her past, but her life was no longer defined by pain or loss. Now she was a respected nurse at the city hospital, a place where she brought hope and healing to those who needed it most. Eli stood by her side through every step, his steady hands building a home filled with love and peace. Their small house was no longer just a shelter, it was a sanctuary of dreams fulfilled. One bright morning, Faith wore her clean white coat and stepped confidently into the hospital's halls. A little boy with wide, curious eyes held her hand tightly. "Thank you for helping me," he said softly. Faith smiled, her heart full. "You're brave, just like you." Later that day, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in gold, Faith and Eli sat quietly on their porch. She looked up at the stars beginning to shine and whispered a prayer of thanks. "God brought me here," she said softly, "from a place of despair to a life of purpose." Eli squeezed her hand. "And you earned every step, Faith. You're stronger than you ever knew." Faith smiled, tears in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of joy. Her journey had been long and difficult. She had been sold like property, forced into a life she never wanted. But through faith, courage, and love, she had reclaimed her destiny. She was no longer just a girl from Umunaka. She was a woman with a name, a future, and a story worth telling. And so, dear friends, remember this: no matter where you start, with faith and strength, you can rise above your storms and build a life filled with light. Thank you for following Faith's journey. If you enjoyed the story, give us a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs hope today, and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest updates.